The film opens in Mombasa, Kenya, where we see a US military official being posted. He is on an independent mission to protect a prisoner from a terrorist group that has already killed 4 of his comrades. Beam then bursts into the building and takes out the terrorists one by one. However, he soon encounters the final leader, who is holding one of his allies captive. Beam drops his weapon and begins negotiating with the terrorist. The latter requests a helicopter to escape, which Beam pretends to agree to. But when the terrorist pulls out his phone, Beam quickly grabs his gun and shoots him dead. After completing his mission successfully, Beam returns to his wife, Gina. They are thrilled to reunite after being apart for a while, and they embrace each other. The couple then travels to an Italian coastal town, where they create many happy memories. One night, after a romantic dinner, Gina notices some battle scars on Beam's body and becomes very worried. However, Beam reassures her that despite the injuries, he will always come home to her. The next morning, when Beam wakes up, he finds Gina missing. He discovers a note saying she went out to get breakfast. Beam doesn't think much of it and continues to prepare for the day. Soon after, 2 unknown individuals break into his room and attack him. Beam successfully overpowers them and rushes outside to find his wife. Outside his door, he bumps into an Englishman and apologizes. But minutes later, Beam staggers and collapses, feeling dazed. The Englishman comes to check on him, but soon changes his demeanor, injecting Beam with a powerful sedative. In the following scene, Beam wakes up tied to a chair and notices the same Englishman moving in front of him. The man introduces himself as Martin Hatchett and inquires about the situation in Mombasa. Beam responds that he doesn't know and that he must follow orders. Martin realizes Beam will not cooperate easily, so he brings in a restrained Gina and threatens to kill her. Beam pleads for her release, claiming she has nothing to do with this. Martin denies his request and asks Beam the same question about Mombasa again. When Beam still cannot answer, Martin kills Gina with a nail gun, mercilessly ending her life. This sight devastates Beam, and he begins shouting, "I am Groot." He warns Martin that he made a grave mistake and that he will find him no matter where he goes. Martin thanks him for the warning, but then shoots Beam in the head, killing him. Soon after, we see Beam waking up in a lab, disoriented. A man named Emil Hartig introduces himself as the head of an organization called RST, which stands for Rising Soul Technology. A woman named KT also appears, informing Beam that he has died and the military donated his body to RST. She explains that Beam has no family because the military only offers the bodies of unclaimed soldiers. It turns out RST managed to resurrect Beam using their technology. Hartig explains that RST has been running trials to restore military assets, including creating skeletal structures for enhanced strength and reinforcing the nervous system to improve responses. While RST has developed remarkable weapons, Beam is the first person they have managed to resurrect. Hartig goes on to explain that Beam was revived with the help of nanites, which are biomechanical constructs allowing him to heal from injuries but requiring regular recharging. Hartig then asks Beam his name and military position, but Beam has no memory of his past. They show Beam around the facility, and he discovers they also have recovery areas where ex-soldiers with restored body parts push themselves to the limit. Splitting reveals that KT was a Navy swimmer in Syria, injured in a chemical attack that damaged her windpipe. She now has a new respirator, greatly improving her breathing. They then introduce Jimmy, a former Navy official who lost both legs in a bombing in Afghanistan, but now wears prosthetic legs. Next is TIBs, a marksman from Iraq who lost his vision, but has had it restored with advanced eye implants. Later, Beam wakes up from his rest and decides to explore the facility. He punches a support beam and rather than getting hurt, the beam breaks. Thrilled to realize he has superhuman strength, Beam continues his exploration. He later encounters KT, who is training underwater. She emerges from the pool, and Beam tells her he had a nightmare. KT replies that it's impossible because he has no memories, implying that's not how dreams work. She then invites him for a drink, and they share shots while listening to music. After the first sip, Beam starts to remember his time in Mombasa, including his relationship with Gina and how Martin Hatchett killed her. Consumed by rage, Beam vows to find the antagonist and kill him. Following this, Beam leaves the facility and uses advanced nanites to track Martin's location in Hungary. Meanwhile, Hartig communicates with him through microchips in his brain, warning him not to go there. Hartig insists that Beam now belongs to him, but Beam disregards the warning. Our hero takes a plane from ISD and figures out how to fly it using a manual he finds online. Soon after, Beam arrives in Hungary and corners Martin and his armed men in a tunnel. Martin is not surprised to see the supposedly dead Beam alive, but is terrified, ordering his men to finish him off. Beam successfully defeats them, and despite being shot several times, his wounds heal instantly. After killing everyone, he confronts Martin, who immediately begins begging for his life. He claims that Hartig is controlling him, but offers to help. Beam refuses to listen and violently shoots Martin to death, completing his revenge. The next morning, Beam drives to where KT, Jimmy, and TIBs are waiting for him. He tells them that pursuing Martin wasn't necessary because he would have returned to the facility anyway. It is revealed that his nanites are low on power due to being used extensively during the previous battle. Later, while Beam is recharging, Jimmy suddenly appears and mocks him for being foolish enough to believe Gina was dead. The revelation shocks Beam, but he soon falls unconscious. We then learn that Hartig has been using Beam as a puppet to kill his enemies. He has implanted false memories in Beam's mind with the help of his technician, Eric. It turns out that everything seen at the beginning of the film was merely a simulation designed to deceive Beam. In reality, Martin had never met Beam or killed his wife. Martin isn't even the first victim. Beam has killed various individuals under similar circumstances. These targets were former ISD researchers who had left the organization for unknown reasons. After Beam falls unconscious, Eric starts resetting his memories and modifying his recollection of Gina's death. He replaces Martin's face with that of another man named Baris. KT finds this situation disturbing and asks Hartig to stop, but he orders her to mind her own business and focus on her work. He threatens to disable her upgrades if she continues to interfere. Soon after, the rebooted Beam awakens in a confused state. Hartig and KT present themselves and show him around the facility once again, just like before. Sometime thereafter, while KT and Beam are drinking again, he recalls Gina's death and recognizes Baris as her killer. Beam then takes a plane from the facility to handle the matter. Hartig attempts to stop him as expected, but a vengeful Beam refuses to listen. Soon after, Beam discovers that his target is in Britain and heads there. He quickly breaks into Baris's house and starts killing his men one by one. Meanwhile, Eric hacks into the mansion's CCTV cameras, allowing them to monitor the situation. He discovers that Baris has hired Wiggins, a brilliant developer who is working on an EMP device designed to neutralize Beam's nanites. It is revealed that this device emits an electromagnetic pulse capable of destroying all of the nanites that repair Beam's body. However, before the device can be activated, it needs to be charged to 100%. Hartig realizes that the situation is too dangerous and orders Beam to leave. However, Beam ignores the warning and silences Hartig. Before the EMP is fully charged, Beam enters Baris's room and accuses him of killing his wife. Baris, confused, denies killing anyone, but Beam shoots him to death, shouting, "I call that a red." He believes it is the first time he has said it. Moments later, someone activates the EMP, causing Beam's nanites to fail. Beam collapses to the ground, and ISD loses all access to him. In the following scene, Beam wakes up to a strong electric charge and sees Wiggins before him. Beam fears for his life, but Wiggins explains that he doesn't care about Baris's death and was simply forced to work for him. He genuinely wants to help Beam and asks about his motivation for killing Baris. Beam explains the circumstances of his wife's death, but admits he has been seeing various faces of her killer. Hearing this, Wiggins quickly deduces what ISD is doing. He reveals that the rumors about people leaving ISD being killed were part of a scheme for private revenge. He then informs Beam that his memory is being manipulated, and that ISD is using him as a pawn to kill people. The revelation shocks Beam, and he hopes that Gina might still be alive. He decides to search for her, but Wiggins worries that if Beam leaves, Hartig will erase his memories and frame him as the killer. Beam assures him this won't happen, despite lacking a solid reason for his assurance, and provides Wiggins with a sample of his nanite-infused blood for analysis. Over time, Beam locates Gina and goes to see her. She is overjoyed to see him after so long, and they embrace each other warmly. However, when Beam reveals that he has returned to be with her, she is confused. Gina informs him that it has been years since they last saw each other, that they parted ways amicably, and that she is now remarried with 2 children. Beam is devastated by this news and leaves without saying a word. As he is driving away, he is suddenly hit by an armored vehicle. It turns out Jimmy and two IBs have tracked him down and are now pursuing him. They relentlessly chase Beam through the city, and Jimmy's prosthetic legs are destroyed when a truck crashes into his vehicle. Moments later, TIB shoots Beam with a projectile designed to disable his nanites, causing him to lose consciousness. In the following scene, Beam is once again taken back to the lab. Hartig orders KT to hunt down Wiggins, but she refuses, angering Hartig. In a fit of rage, he switches of her respirator, causing her to struggle to breathe. With no other options, KT reluctantly agrees to complete the task. We later see her confronting Wiggins on the road, asking him to light her cigarette. He agrees casually, but when he inhales the fumes from the cigarette, he is knocked unconscious. Sometime later, Hartig places Beam in a simulation and prepares to erase his memory again. At this moment, KT returns and deceives Hartig, claiming that Wiggins has moved away. It is revealed that she has secretly allied with Wiggins, who is now hacking into the RSD system. Shortly after, Beam's reset cycle begins, but KT enters the control room and disables the system. When Hartig discovers this, he tries to kill her by turning off her respirator. However, Wiggins has already disabled access to her implants, so she cannot be harmed. At this point, Beam also wakes up and begins wreaking havoc in the facility by throwing explosives. This forces Hartig to retreat to a safe area, but not before ordering Jimmy and TIBs to handle the situation. Jimmy then attaches mechanical arms to his back, and both of them pursue Beam. Despite their combined efforts, they cannot match Beam's strength. The three fight near an elevator until the structure starts to collapse. TIB soon falls to his death while screaming for help, but Jimmy remains determined to destroy Beam. The two men engage in a fierce battle, and the elevator eventually falls, causing them to plummet from the building. Jimmy dies from the impact, while Beam quickly recovers thanks to his nanites. Realizing his plan has failed, Hartig tries to escape in his vehicle, but Beam catches up to him. The malevolent scientist fires several explosives at Beam, causing significant damage. However, Beam recovers each time due to his nanites. Hartig then warns him that when his nanites reach 0, he will die. Minutes later, Beam grabs the last explosive, and the two begin to struggle. Ultimately, our hero sacrifices himself by detonating the explosive between him and Hartig, killing them both. In the final scene, Beam suddenly wakes up to find Wiggins before him. It turns out Wiggins had revived him and improved the nanites' endurance, so he no longer needs to recharge them constantly. Beam thanks him and heads outside, where he meets KT. She apologizes for deceiving him and keeping Hartig's plan secret, but Beam no longer seems to care. He explains that while they cannot change their past, they have control over their future. The film closes with the trio driving off into the distance, searching for a new life.